You hear Goldman Sachs and something happens in your brain before you can stop it. You picture the floor, the glass tower, the number. $90,000 base, first year, straight out of college, more than your parents made combined for most of your childhood, landing in your account every 2 weeks like clockwork. You picture the life that comes with it. The apartment that doesn't have a water stain on the ceiling. The dinner where you don't check the right column first. The feeling of having solved something the rest of your graduating class is still circling. That's the picture. Here's what you actually trade for it. Your name is on a deal team by week 3. You don't know what you don't know yet, which is the only reason you say yes to everything with a straight face. The first all-nighter doesn't feel like a warning. It feels like initiation, like proof you belong somewhere that doesn't let just anyone through the door. You tell yourself that at 3 a.m., rebuilding a discounted cash flow model because a VP 3 time zones away decided the terminal growth rate felt aggressive and sent a single-line email at 11:47 p.m. that said, "Let's revisit." You don't sleep, you revise, you send it back by 5. By 9 a.m., it's in a deck you didn't build the front half of, going to a client whose name you've been spelling correctly for 6 weeks and mispronouncing in your head the entire time. That is the job. Not in a cynical way, in a precise way. Analyst model. They build the comps, pull the precedent transactions, populate the data room, format the pitch book so the fonts are consistent down to the decimal alignment in tables that will be glanced at for 4 seconds by someone who flew in from Zurich. They own the version control on documents that change 17 times in a single afternoon. They field comments from associates, from VPs, from MDs, occasionally from someone on the client side who has a question that needs to be answered before the 6 p.m. call, and it is currently 5:43. The work is not glamorous, and it is not supposed to be. The glamour, if there is any, lies several floors and several years above you. What catches most people off guard isn't the volume. It's the architecture of the pressure. You're not on one deal. You're on 3, sometimes 4, each one at a different stage of its cycle, each one staffed by a different VP with a different style, different expectations, a different definition of what a clean model looks like. One wants every assumption color-coded. One wants a clean white sheet with the inputs hidden. You learn both. You run between them. And then a deal you thought was quiet goes live on a Tuesday, and suddenly that team needs you at full capacity for the next 6 weeks, including both Saturdays, and the other 2 deals don't pause to accommodate that. They just keep moving. You keep moving with them. The hours during a live deal are not an exaggeration people tell to sound important. They are a structural feature of how transactions get done. When a company is selling itself, the timeline doesn't flex because the analyst needs 8 hours. Investment banks work in parallel with lawyers, accountants, target-side advisors, buyer diligence teams, and every one of those work streams generates questions that feed back into your model, your data room, your slide deck at hours that have no name. You stop thinking in days. You think in calls. There's the 8 a.m. internal sync, the 2 p.m. client update, the 10 p.m. partner check-in, and somewhere in between you eat something from a bag and send a version 14 of a document you've rebuilt from scratch twice. Then there's the money, and this is where the picture gets complicated. $90,000 sounds enormous until you net it in New York. Federal taxes, state taxes, city taxes, FICA, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 a month, take home on the base, depending on how you file. A 1-bedroom in a neighborhood that doesn't make your parents nervous is $1,800 at minimum, closer to $22,000 if you want a doorman building because you're getting home at 2 a.m. and the lobby matters. Subtract food, subway, the occasional necessity of a cab at midnight after a closing dinner, and the base salary starts to feel like a comfortable floor rather than a number that changes your life. The bonus is the number that changes your life. But the bonus comes once a year, it's discretionary, and in your first year you won't see it until February at the earliest, which means you spend 14 months performing before the scoreboard updates. The failure modes at this level are not dramatic. They're granular and they compound. A wrong number in a table that makes it through to the client. A version of a document sent before incorporating the last round of comments because it was 1 a.m. and you genuinely lost track. A response that takes 4 hours because you were buried in something else and the VP needed it in 45 minutes. None of these end careers alone. Together, over a 2-year analyst program, they build a reputation before you have enough wins to absorb them. The analysts who make it to the top of their class are not always the most technically brilliant. They are the ones who are reliably, consistently, without complaint available. Responsive at 11 p.m., accurate under fatigue. Able to manage 5 sets of feedback simultaneously without letting any one of them feel deprioritized. That is the skill being evaluated, not the degree, not the GPA, not the brand name on the resume that got you in the door. The rating comes at the end of the program and it determines everything. Whether you stay for a 3rd year, whether you get the associate offer, whether the VP who ran the deal you staffed for 6 months puts your name forward or just moves on. And this is the part that most people outside the industry miss entirely. The analyst who builds the best model is not automatically the analyst who gets promoted. The analyst who made the MD's life measurably easier at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday in the middle of a fire drill is the one who gets the call. 2 years of that, and the exits are real. Private equity, hedge funds, corporate development, business school with a name on the door. But first you have to get through the 2 a.m. And the 2 a.m. doesn't care what you thought you were signing up for. You survive the analyst years and something shifts. Not immediately, not cleanly, but somewhere around the time you stop triple-checking your model, because a VP might catch something and start triple-checking it because you're the one who's going to catch something in someone else's. That's the transition nobody writes on a whiteboard for you. You went from being the person who executes to being the person who is responsible for the execution. Those are not the same job. They just look similar from the outside. The associate title comes with a salary bump that feels significant until you realize what you've actually purchased with it. You've purchased accountability without authority. You are now the quality control layer between the analyst who built the deck at 2 a.m. and the MD who will present it at 9. Every number that's wrong before it gets to that room passed through you. Every slide that tells the wrong story, every transition that doesn't flow, every model tab that's formatted differently from the one before it, that's yours. The analyst made the mistake. You let it through. In the hierarchy of responsibility, those are treated as the same thing. So you learn to review differently than you modeled. Modeling is heads down, one thread, sequential. Reviewing is something closer to pattern recognition under mild paranoia. You read a deck the way a client will read it, looking for the moment the narrative breaks, the place where the number on slide 12 doesn't match the assumption on slide 7, the label that says millions when the table is in thousands. You find it before anyone above you does, or you find out very quickly that finding it before anyone above you does is the entire point of your existence on the team. The people management part of being an associate is something nobody teaches you formally because banks assume proximity will do it. You sit near the analysts. You were one recently. Figure it out. What you actually learn, mostly by doing it wrong a few times, is that feedback given poorly is just noise that makes people defensive. You have to say the thing that fixes the problem without making someone feel like the problem is them, because the analyst who feels humiliated doesn't ask you the clarifying question next time. They guess. They send you a version they're not sure about and hope it clears, and at midnight when you catch it, you both lose an hour you didn't have. The analysts who work for you well are the ones you taught to ask you early. That lesson costs you nothing to give and saves you everything when the deal gets live. Then comes VP, and VP is where the architecture changes underneath you in a way that feels like the floor dropped 6 inches without warning. Because at associate, you own the output. At VP, you own the workstream. Narrative, timeline, internal alignment, client communication, risk surface, all of it. The associate tells you the deck is ready. You're the one who decides whether ready means ready or whether it means the analyst finished it and nobody checked the story yet. You're the one on the call when the CFO asks why the multiple on the comparable company is different from the number in the teaser that went out 3 weeks ago, and you have 12 seconds to answer correctly before that question becomes a problem that outlives the call. Client exposure at VP is where people find out what they're actually made of. Managing directors protect their client relationships the way people protect anything it took them a decade to build. You get access to those relationships in proportion to how much you reduce the risk of something going wrong inside them. The first time you lead a call solo, you feel it in your chest before you dial. Not fear exactly, more like the awareness that the room has no margin for you to find your footing publicly. You have to already have your footing. You have to know the deal well enough that a hard question from the CFO doesn't make you stall, and you have to know the client relationship well enough that you don't accidentally say the true thing at the wrong moment, because some true things are only useful when the senior banker is in the room to contextualize them. The compensation at VP starts to reflect something more complicated than hours logged. Bonuses at this level are tied to deal outcomes, team performance, and the judgment calls you made that nobody can directly observe but that seniors notice through their absence. The MD who didn't get a surprised look from the client, the deal that closed without a fire drill in the final week, the analyst who came out of the process actually better than they went in. None of that shows up in a spreadsheet. All of it shows up in the number you get in February. Politics at VP is real in a way it wasn't before because the stakes are real in a way they weren't before. You are building a reputation inside a machine that has a long memory and short patience for people who make the same mistake twice. The allies you build across product groups, the trust you earn with the coverage MD who could route work your direction or around you, the relationship with the legal team that makes the diligence process 2 days shorter than it would otherwise be. That infrastructure is your asset base as much as any deal you've closed. And this is precisely where a meaningful number of good people leave, not because they failed, but because they looked up from the workstream long enough to notice what the next 5 years cost. VP to MD is not a promotion. It's a reinvention. You stop owning work streams and start owning revenue. You stop managing teams and start building books of business. For some people, the exits at associate and VP aren't retreats. They're the moments someone correctly identifies the game they actually want to play and goes to play it somewhere the rules are different. Private equity, corporate strategy, a fund that only answers to its LPs. Not everyone who walks out is leaving. Some of them just finally know where they're going. So you stay. And the reinvention begins. The director title is the corridor between the old job and the new one. You still know how to do everything the associates and VPs do, and occasionally you'll pull up a model at midnight because something doesn't feel right and you need to see the mechanics yourself. But that's not what you're being paid for anymore, and the sooner you understand that distinction in your bones, the better your chances of surviving the next transition. You're not being evaluated on whether you can build the thing. You're being evaluated on whether you can find the room where the thing needs to exist before anyone else does. Then you make MD, and the floor drops again. The difference between director and MD is simple to say and brutal to live. A director is expected to show that origination is possible for them. An MD is expected to prove it every year in a number attached to their name, visible to everyone above them. You are no longer measured by the quality of the process. You are measured by the revenue the process generated and how much of that revenue the firm can credibly attribute to you specifically. That word, attribution, becomes the most expensive word in your vocabulary. Client coverage at this level is not a relationship. It's a practice. The CFO you've known for 6 years needs to hear from you on a cadence that feels organic, but is anything but. You are tracking what's happening in their sector, their balance sheet, their board composition, their competitors' last move. You are showing up with a point of view before they've asked for one, because the moment they have a problem and call someone else first, you've already started losing. Becoming the trusted advisor is not a personality trait. It's a discipline that looks like one. You stay relevant by being useful before the need is obvious, and you stay in the room by being the person who made the last idea work. Internal selling is the part nobody puts in the job description. You might have the client relationship, but you don't have the product specialists, the risk appetite, the compliance bandwidth, or the balance sheet committed yet. Getting the firm behind your idea means walking a structured credit desk through why this deal is worth their time, convincing a coverage MD in a different product group that this cross-sell benefits them too, and making the case to risk and legal without sounding like you're asking for a favor when you're really asking for a priority. You are not just a banker anymore. You are a coalition builder inside a machine that has its own competing interests, and your deal lives or dies on whether you can navigate that before the client ever sees a pitch book. Execution leadership at MD means you run the room on the moments that matter and you let everything else move without you. Pricing call, negotiation session, crisis pivot at 11 p.m. when the deal is in danger. Those are yours. The details are not. The details belong to the VP who has been living in the data room for 3 weeks, and your job is to make sure that VP doesn't need you for the details while knowing you'll be there the second the room turns political. The transition from owning the workstream to owning the outcome requires a specific kind of trust in your team that takes time to develop and costs real money when it's misplaced. You learn eventually how to delegate without disappearing. The money at MD reflects all of this in a way that can make good years feel extraordinary and bad ones feel existential. Base salary is a number that could support most people's lives comfortably and is almost beside the point. What matters is the variable component, and the variable component is a function of your revenue attribution, the strength of your client franchise, your cross-sell contributions, and something harder to quantify that senior leadership calls franchise value, which is the business that exists because of your presence and would walk out the door if you did. In a strong year with the right mandates closing in the right market, the number is generational. In a down cycle with 2 deals that fell over and a client who went quiet, the number is a reminder that you are not an employee in the traditional sense. You are closer to a business inside a business, and businesses have bad years. Career risk at MD is reputational in a way it never was before. A bad quarter can be explained. A bad year gets a conversation. 2 bad years in a row and the firm starts doing arithmetic around your seat. Market cycles are not fair to MDs who happen to cover sectors that went cold. Restructurings and layoffs at senior levels are quieter than they are at analyst, but they are not less real. The people who survive the cycles are the ones who built coverage wide enough that when one vertical slows, another one carries the load, and who never let their junior pipeline run dry. Because the MD who stopped developing talent runs out of leverage inside the firm before they realize it's happening. A strong MD looks like this in practice: a pipeline that isn't dependent on one client, the ability to walk into a conversation with a treasurer, a CEO, and a CFO and have a different relevant conversation with each of them, a VP on the team who's ready to move up and knows it's because of how you ran the room, and a reputation inside the firm for deals that close the way you said they would close. That last one travels further than any single tombstone. Because the market remembers almost nothing. The people in the building remember everything. And then there's the room where the number has a different kind of weight entirely. Partner. The title that doesn't appear on most org charts because most firms don't use the word, but everyone inside the building knows exactly who holds the seat and what it means when they walk into a room. At Goldman, it's one of the most selective designations in finance. Not a promotion you apply for. An election. And the number attached to it, the book, the client franchise, the recurring revenue your name is responsible for generating, can run north of $50 million annually. That number sounds like an arrival. It is not an arrival. It is a different kind of weight than anything that came before it, and the people carrying it will tell you that the job stops feeling like a career somewhere around year 3 and starts feeling like a form of permanent accountability that never fully clocks out. Start with what the book actually means because people get this wrong. A $50 million book is not 50 million sitting in an account with your name on it. It is recurring client revenue, wallet share across products, mandates that came because you were in the room and would leave if you left. It is fragile in a way that a salary is not. A salary requires you to show up. A book requires you to matter, continuously, to the specific human beings who chose to do business with this firm because they trust you specifically. Lose one anchor relationship to a retirement, an acquisition, a competitor who flew in with a better idea at the right moment, and the book shrinks in a way that everyone above you can see in real time. The number is a living thing. It breathes, and your job every single day is to keep it breathing. The responsibilities at this level are not about execution anymore. They are structural. Partners make decisions about the firm, not just for clients. Which sectors to invest coverage resources in, which MDs are ready to carry more, and which ones are quietly becoming a problem. Which strategic bets the business should be taking in a market that's shifted, and which ones need to be quietly unwound before they become expensive. You are part of the institution now in a way that the analyst, the VP, even the MD is not. Your judgment about people, about risk, about where the business should point next, that judgment has consequences that outlast any single deal. Getting a person decision wrong at partner level doesn't hurt one engagement. It shapes a team's culture for 3 years. Risk at this level is a different animal than it was before. Regulatory exposure is real and personal. Reputational consequences for a deal that goes sideways can attach to your name in ways that circulate the market long after the deal is forgotten. Balance sheet consequences when a structured position moves against the firm and your franchise was the relationship that brought it in, those conversations happen in rooms you are now expected to sit in, not be summoned to. You are accountable in the way that a business owner is accountable, not the way an employee is. There is no ceiling above you absorbing the blast anymore. You are the ceiling. The lifestyle people imagine at this level is real in one dimension and completely wrong in another. You are not doing all-nighters the way you did at 24. But you are never fully off. The availability is constant, just restructured. A CEO in Singapore doesn't need you to build the model. They need you on a call at 6 a.m. your time because something moved in their sector and they want to think out loud with someone they trust before markets open. The travel is relentless, not because someone scheduled it, but because the relationships that make up $50 million in franchise value require physical presence at a cadence that no amount of video call quality can replace. You are in a different city or a different country often enough that the word home starts to describe a place you sleep between obligations rather than a place you live. Staying partner means something specific. It means protecting the franchise value that got you elected in the first place. It means identifying the MDs under you who are 2 years away from being what you are now and investing in them the way someone invested in you, because a partner with no succession pipeline is a partner whose business dies when they do. The firm is always doing the math on what walks out the door if you do. Your job is to make sure the answer to that question keeps getting smaller over time, because you built the people behind you into forces of their own. The real payoff is not the number, though the number in a strong year is genuinely extraordinary. It is influence. The ability to shape what the firm becomes, which clients it serves, which talent it keeps, which deals define its reputation in the next decade. It is long-term compensation that compounds in ways most people will never experience and were never designed to access from the outside. And it is the knowledge that the job is still not done, that there is no version of this seat where you sit back and collect, because the market doesn't offer that version to anyone, and the people who thought it would are the ones the firm quietly moves around. Every rank in this building is a different bet you're making with your time and your identity. The analyst bets their sleep, the associate bets their expertise. The VP bets their ownership, the MD bets their reputation. The partner bets all of it, all at once, permanently, against a number that can always shrink. So drop it in the comments, which rank sounds most like something you'd want, and which one sounds like the version of this job you'd walk away from fastest. Subscribe if you want more of this, because the way money actually works inside these buildings is a very different story than the one on the outside looking in.